Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our security deep dive, and thank you so much for making InfoExchange your first appointment of the day. I promise that this is going to be one of the best couple of hours you can spend on a Wednesday morning. But before we begin, I need to do a little housekeeping. For security purposes, only presenters and panelists are allowed to speak. So participants, that's you guys, you can ask questions, however, and to do that, you just click that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We encourage lots of questions. Please keep them coming. We will get to them at the end of the presentation. Someone will acknowledge them and read them out, and our experts, our panel of experts will answer them. So good. As many of you may recall, a couple of weeks ago, we held one of the first seminars of its kind in Jamaica, where we brought 3 market leaders to discuss and present from a practical perspective, data privacy and compliance, the relentless attacks on cyber on data security by cyber criminals, and of course, how to get cyber insurance if all else fails. So we brought those 3 together. And coming out of that, we were looking at having these deep dive seminars, because one of the things is that the cyber criminals are motivated by vast sums of money that they can get at very minimal risk. So what's happening is that these attacks are becoming more relentless. They're increasing in both frequency and severity. So the odds are that at some point in time, you'll be affected in some way in the very near future. But that's bad enough. But what really concerns me is that every company that you've heard that has suffered some security breach had some security in place. You ask them all and they all did. So why did they get breached? Well, we believe that they have blind spots in their security, things that they didn't know about. Yeah, there's no 100% guarantee. There's no 100% guarantee, but there are things that you must do to give your business the best fighting chance. And one of those things is to understand or recognize that the way we operate and perform our work has changed. And many of the old approaches that we grew up with and are familiar with, are comfortable with, no longer are as effective. So as promised in that data privacy and protection seminar, today's seminar is our first in a series where we're going to specifically address some of these blind spots in your security. So with that said, I don't want to take up all the time. I want to really get down to the meat of the matter. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to our CIO, Mr. Ondell Williams, who will do some formal introductions. He'll be the moderator for today and frame the discussions. So I'll see everybody on the other side. Ondell, over to you.
Good morning, David. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As we know, the world has changed. We are now working from home instead of working from the office. We have our users not behind the security perimeters that we have at the office, but they are now on their own at home, accessing the internet, accessing your crown jewels that are within your office premises and behind your firewall. And one of the things that we have seen is that through late 2019 into 2020 and further into 2021, the number of attacks have increased and the number of compromises have increased as well. So as most users are now working remotely, they are no longer behind your security perimeter. Ransomware has become and has been a multi-million-dollar industry that is thriving. What is it that we can do to actually make sure that our defenses are much improved and that we move to a state where our security posture is such that we can safely and quietly sleep at night and know that we are not in a situation where we're just at in harm's way. So let us look at how we can improve our internet access in terms of our security for internet access, our security when it comes to remote access. Most users and companies are still using VPNs. We will show today that VPNs may not be the best way to go. The most attacked endpoint in 2020 was the VPN. So let us try and look beyond the VPN and see what else is there that we can do to actually secure our users and our crown jewels. IT teams are under pressure, we know, but there is a solution, there is a better way. So without further ado, let me introduce the speakers for today and the topic. The topic is actually using Zero Trust to transform your security stack and power the modern workplace. And our first speaker today is Yitzhak Velasquez. He's a commercial account executive for Zscaler. Yitzhak has 8 years of technology consulting experience and has specialized in cybersecurity for the past 4 years in emerging markets, that is Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, he lives in Dallas, Texas, and is in the business of helping companies become more cybersecure with Zscaler. Our second speaker will be Michael Rockey. He's Zscaler's sales engineer. Michael has his roots in network engineering, having worked across several industries, such as tertiary education, aviation, and finance. He has been solving problems in the IT space for almost 10 years now and enjoys working with groups to identify their needs and solve them with Zscaler. Michael is also based in Dallas, Texas. So without further comment, Yitzhak, over to you. Good day and good morning.
The cloud and mobility are creating a mega shift that's disrupting 30 years of networking and security infrastructure. Let me share with you why a traditional network and security architecture is no longer suitable for the cloud and mobile first world. Applications are moving to SaaS and to public clouds. The users are no longer sitting in the office. They are working from everywhere. But security is still anchored to the data center. Until now, Zscaler is redefining network security. We are a pioneer in cloud security and are a market leader. Today, the Zscaler cloud protects more than 2,800 customers with users in over 185 countries. More than 200 of the Forbes Global 2000 count on Zscaler to help them move securely to the cloud. During peak periods, our cloud processes almost 40 billion transactions per day. It blocks more than 100 million threats every day and performs over 120,000 unique security updates to keep users safe. Zscaler has a massive opportunity to replace that network security market. And in the process, we offer our customers the opportunity to substantially reduce spending on expensive networking infrastructure as they embrace a mobile-first and a cloud-first strategy.
All right, perfect. And so thank you so much for that introduction on the Info Exchange team. It is an honor to be here in front of the audience that we have today. Not every day I get to speak to a broad audience like today. So thanks so much for just dedicating some time to understand how Info Exchange is helping Zscaler transform and protect our customers' environment. So this is the world that we live in today. And it has tremendously changed for the past few years. What we were used to protect before just no longer looks the same. As you can see, each one of those endpoints becomes an extension of your attack surface. You can see some metrics of how this will continue to explode. This is a movement that started a few years ago and it's not going to stop. The attack surface will continue to become more and more distributed. And you can see a few metrics on the slide. So now let's take a look at how companies have been doing security over the past few years. I would venture to say past few decades. So all of us know that the internet, when it just first appeared, it was literally just used for two things, for searching and for entertainment, especially around watching videos. That was literally the use case for the internet when it first appeared in the world. But all of us here know that that has changed tremendously. That's not the case anymore. So what we see on the screen is what's known as a hub and spoke architecture. And this architecture serves us well in a pre-cloud world. Why? Because everything revolved around the data center. Applications used to live in the data center before. So it actually made sense to build your security around your trusted network. And this is what we actually call castle and moat security, a perimeter-centric architecture. But let me ask you this question. How come this architecture is still being used in today's world where the data center is not, at least the data center on premise, is not the center of gravity anymore? So let me take a look here, because I do have, by the way, guys, a few poll questions I'm going to be asking here. So pay attention to this, because you could actually win a prize today if you answer, whoever answers most of the correct questions at the end of today's webinar, okay? So I'll give you a heads up once we have the first poll question so no one misses it. So let's continue. Basically why we're here, right? Why are we talking about this hub and spoke architecture? Because that becomes the main inhibitor to digital transformation, right? Like I just mentioned before, it does not make sense anymore, and Gartner speaks about this, to backhaul traffic of all these branch offices and remote users back to the data center so that you can enforce security policies before it goes out to the internet. And you can see a few of the risks, of the challenges that this traditional model represents: productivity loss, increased business risk, and higher cost and complexity. We all know that this backhauling involves VPN, MPLS, a lot of the time MPLS costs. And not everyone is willing to open up and firing up the VPN. We'll learn more about this as we continue to move in today's webinar. A lot of the users, and again, I love to speak about real-life, real-world examples. So most of my conversation, you will hear me say and quoting what other companies have told us. A lot of the time, users decide to circumvent the VPN because, again, that brings and introduces latency most of the time. Sometimes VPN doesn't fire up. I'm not saying that happens always, but we hear this from many security leaders that users decide just to connect directly to the internet because of all these factors and more. So when we talk about digital transformation, I am sure that's not a new term for you guys. But in 3 simple steps, what do we mean by digital transformation? First, start moving your workloads, your applications to the cloud, either internally managed or externally managed, right? That's what we see on the screen. It's being called as external applications or internal applications. Then we start talking about, let's transform the network. Let's consider the internet as the new connectivity layer. But guess what? We all know here that the internet is inherently a threat. It's not secure, right? And that's exactly where Zscaler comes in. That network transformation, this whole digital transformation, needs to be done in a safe and secure way. This actually also needs a security transformation. How come all of these other areas within your technology ecosystem has been granted the luxury of being transformed, but no security? It does not make sense to have all of your other stuff being transformed, being moved to the cloud, but you're still relying on hardware for your security. It does not scale. And that is when I start talking a little bit about Zscaler. This is where the first poll question, by the way, comes into play. So be prepared. So InfoExchange team, if you can post the first poll question, I would greatly appreciate it. So the first question reads, how many years has Zscaler been a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for secure web gateways? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So we'll give it a few seconds until everyone can enter the response, and we'll find out the truth behind this question. All right. Perfect. So the correct question is, well, I see that, by the way, if I keep looking at my right screen, it's just because this is where I have my other screen, I'm looking at the answer. So I see that 47% of the people attending today answered correctly. 42% reply 5 years. So I'm glad the majority actually got it right. Congratulations to all of you. You're closer to that prize at the end of today's webinar. So Zscaler, the person that you saw at the beginning of the video, that was Jay Chaudhry. He is our founder and current CEO for Zscaler. This is one of the reasons why I feel very passionate about what I do at my current company. Zscaler was founded 13 years ago. And when we were founded, Jay Chaudhry had this vision of why isn't security consumed as a service? Why everything else it started being consumed as a service, but no security? Why am I looking at all this hardware being stacked at my customer's data center? 3 years afterwards, we were named a leader in the Magic Quadrant of Gartner, as you can see here on the screen. We've been named 10 years in a row a leader in the Magic Quadrant for secure web gateway. What's different about this year, and I want to highlight this, is that we are the only vendor in the whole leader quadrant. This is no easy task, and hopefully this speaks a little bit about what we've been doing in the market for our customers. This is a reflection of our customers' feedback. And you can see a little bit of what I would call return of their investment instead of customer value. How we were able to reduce by 35 times the amount of infected machines for NOV, an oil and gas company. By the way, this is public information. You can Google it. It's a very interesting research of how they got to that return of investment metric. How we're able for Siemens to reduce 30% of their hardware cost infrastructure. Maybe this one, a little bit more obvious in Zscaler, is cloud-based only. All right, so what exactly is it that we do? You're looking on the screen. We securely connect users, devices, and applications using business policy over any network. My hope is that at the end of today's webinar, you understand exactly what Zscaler could do for you guys, which at the end of the day would be, you will have a security policy. Forget about names, forget about tools. At the end of the day, what you will have is a security policy that will follow the user regardless of where they are. Okay? Across any network, across any infrastructure. And that is our mission. what I mentioned at the beginning and how I feel aligned to this particular mission of our company, to make the cloud a safe place to do business and enjoyable for users. Now, before I actually spoil it, so hopefully you were paying attention, we have our second poll question. How many data centers does Zscaler have around the world? 75, 100, 125, or more than 150? So we'll give it a few seconds until everyone has a chance to respond. All right, 5 more seconds. All right, let's see how we did. Oh, wow. Oh, wow, you guys were paying attention? Are you very fast with Google search? So more than 83% of the people got it right. We do have more than 150 data centers spread around 6 continents in the world. Why is this even important? There's a lot of things, by the way. Jay Chaudhary at the beginning of the video, he did a fantastic job on summarizing it within 2 minutes. What exactly is it that we do for our customers? But there's a couple of things that I want to highlight as I'm continuing my conversation here. Why is this even important? This is not, believe me, this is not us bragging about the amount of data centers that we have. This is one of the main reasons how we got to that previous metric that I showed you before in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. We've been able to help some of these customers that have multinational presence thanks to what you're looking on the screen. This is our own metal, our own space, our own data center. So we are the largest inline security cloud sitting in over 150 data centers around the world. So that is how we're able to protect you and your company, regardless of how many users you could have in the Caribbean, regardless of how many locations you could have spread around Jamaica or the Caribbean in general. If we're able to do it for some of these companies, I can guarantee you that we should be able to do it for you guys. Now, this is what I would like to call a story of automation. That's how I call this particular picture that you're looking at the screen. So let me walk you through this. This is our technology ecosystem partner. What does that even mean? Because I know there's a lot of graphics on what you're looking at the screen. So think about this. At the center is Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange. It doesn't mean that we are the most important technology in your ecosystem, but what we're telling you is that through API, we can integrate with all these different areas that you already have or that you could decide to have. At the end of the day, I can guarantee you that no customer wants to bring in a new technology just to end up with more manual tasks, correct? It's all about automation. It's all about how can I take advantage of my current investment. Zscaler together with Info Exchange will allow you to do that. Would allow you to take advantage of your identity management providers, endpoint protection, cloud providers, and security operations. Of course, we do have some strategic partnerships with a few of these brands that you're looking at the screen. And even so with branch router or AKA SD-WAN technologies. So we're able to offer that for you guys. You won't have more isolated or you won't have to create more silos between products. Zscaler would allow you to communicate between each one of these sections. Now, let's talk about at a very high level. We'll see with Michael these solutions with a deeper look, but we have 4 integrated and comprehensive solutions. It starts with internet access. With this particular solution at a high level, what we're doing is protecting all of your users, regardless of where they are, every time they're connecting to the internet, without having to backhaul traffic to your particular location. So let's say a user is in Europe or a user is in the United States, South America, Ecuador, which is where I'm from, by the way, We don't care. You will have security policy that follows the user wherever they go, and they will have safe, secure internet connection without having to compromise your attack surface. Next, this is what we talk about zero trust network access. What you're looking at the screen is an alternative to the VPN. The most common reason why companies are talking around with us around private access is because they're trying to find an alternative that's faster, more secure than the traditional VPN that was purposely built for when things revolve around the network. And we know today, hopefully so far, that that's not the case. Then we start talking about Zscaler digital experience. This is how you will be able to identify issues. Since everything will be flowing through Zscaler, we will provide you with a wholesome visibility into your user's experience, into your user's traffic, so that you can triage where issues could be located. So maybe you're using a different tool when a person is asking you today, I'm having difficulties connecting to this particular SaaS application. Could you help me out? And then you're having issues. Your technicians are spending a lot of ticketing time trying to troubleshoot this because they think it's something wrong with their infrastructure, when in fact, it was the SaaS application that experienced a downtime. This solution will help you triage where issues could be located and more. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this, when we start talking about digital transformation, it's all about how you continue to move applications and workloads to the cloud. We will be able to protect these application-to-application communications within the same platform. Again, we'll take a deeper look at each one of these here in just a second with Michael. Now, this is the last, I guess, section. I know there might be a little bit of information in here, and you can read the information that's on the slide. These are some of the typical customer benefits that we have measured after they have deployed Zscaler. These are some of the typical customer benefits that our customers have experienced and been able to measure after deploying Zscaler. You can see that with actually company name and the metric. So this is not just us saying, oh, we were able to provide some cost optimization. I'm not saying Zscaler is going to save you tons of money, but we could actually simplify your architecture. We could actually simplify the meantime you have to resolve an issue. We could simplify and improve the user experience, therefore increasing productivity for the bottom line, which is revenue for your company. That's what we're saying. So we're able, again, going through these typical customer benefits, help with technology cost optimization, simplification of that outbound or internet security appliances. So instead of having one vendor doing your DLP, one vendor doing your SSL, another one doing firewall, another one doing sandbox, you could actually get rid of that and start consolidating, unifying that within just one platform. A platform that's going to give you all of that in a distributed way, delivered through the cloud, enhancing your security posture and compliance. We already saw that the attack surface is so broad, it's not focused on the network anymore. And Zscaler will help you attack each one of these vectors. And therefore, you could experience an improved user experience for all of your users without having to backhaul traffic back to the data center. You could directly connect to one of our data centers and have and enjoy that improved user experience that could end up in a improvement on productivity. So now we have finished discussing at a high level, and hopefully the biggest takeaway here is today's approach does not work in today's world anymore. What the majority of the companies continue to use doesn't work in the world that we live in today. It does not make sense anymore to continue to protect all of this distributed surface or presence of a company with traditional hardware. It doesn't work anymore. So we'll take a deeper look here with Michael. I won't spoil anything, but he has great things prepared for you guys at a more technical level of each one of these areas. So thank you so much for your time and continue to enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Yitzhak. So let me go ahead and share my screen out if we're ready. And we'll get that in presentation mode. Perfect. All right, yeah. How's it going, everybody? I'm going to do exactly what Yitzhak said I'm going to do. So my job essentially here is to get a little bit more granular into what Zero Trust is, what Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange is, and how we're going to help you to accomplish some of the things that we've talked about, namely securing your users when they go out to the web, as well as replacing your VPN. So with that, the first thing we're going to talk about is what is Zero Trust in general. And so I don't mean to scare anybody, but this is probably what your network looks like right now, or something like it. You know, me having been in a lot of different organizations as a network engineer, there are drawings like this all over the place. And it's no wonder why people continue to be breached, because this is pretty confusing to look at, right? In a traditional hub and spoke network, you're connecting networks together rather than connecting people. So you usually end up having to manage a lot of different VLANs. You've got a lot of different networks connected together. That's just at your branch locations or when people are maybe on the VPN. When you actually get into your data center where your applications or your crown jewels are living, it gets even worse. So you're having to sort of segment stuff up at a network layer, and that means VLANs and subnets. That means access control lists. And even worse, that means internal firewalls. And along with internal firewalls becomes routing. And you can see all the lines going in different directions. So trying to segment stuff up in a network-based world doesn't work anymore. And it leads to complexity. It gives you, you know, it reduces your ability to scale, and it leaves you open to vulnerabilities. So what we try to connect in a zero trust world is that we want to connect users to applications irrespective of the network, right? Your users have gone home, they're working from branch locations, they're working from coffee shops, maybe if they're lucky, they're working from a beach somewhere. So let's focus on connecting users to applications, not networks to networks. And some benefits that we're going to get out of this is that we're going to be able to build policies for what people are allowed to access. That's going to be, it's not going to depend on what network they're on. We're going to help to reduce the attack surface. And because of the way that Zscaler's architecture is built out, we're going to be able to inspect all that traffic. We're going to be able to ensure that it's secure. We're not just doing network-based security where, you know, everything on the SSH port or the RDP port is open like a traditional firewall would. We're going to be able to look inside of it and ensure that it's secure. And one very important thing that I wanted to call out at the beginning, you know, transformation can kind of be a big scary word, right? You're thinking to yourself, okay, what am I going to have to install? What am I going to have to manage? And so the overarching thing that I want to talk about over the course of this entire talk is that transformation with Zscaler is easy. It can be as simple as just deploying our Zscaler agent onto your end user machines, and then you're done. Your user's internet is secure. We can securely broker them to your internal applications. So it's going to be fast, it's going to be seamless, and it's not something that's going to require a heavy lift from your organization to get up and running. We have a lot of different groups that can deploy Zscaler incredibly quickly. I have down here at the bottom right-hand corner that shell. We secured 130,000 desktops and laptops in just 6 weeks. So being able to give everybody that security in that sort of time frame, pretty much unheard of, but that's basically what Zscaler can do because we've transformed security into security as a service in our cloud. So now we're going to get a little bit deeper. So what is actually in the Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange? So we kind of want to tie this back, or I want to tie this back to some of the things that you might currently see on premises in your network. So we're going to start with Zscaler Internet Access, which is on the left-hand side. So Zscaler started at the very beginning in 2007 as essentially a proxy in the cloud, which was way ahead of everybody else at that time. I just realized the other day that the first iPhone came out in 2007. So having been doing this since essentially smartphones were born, way ahead of everybody else. Basically, so we've grown to be more than just a proxy in the cloud. We are an entire secure access service edge. So it makes sense. You can see kind of in the bottom left-hand corner some of the applications that you might recognize currently sitting in your data center. So Zscaler is going to be able to replace your URL filter or your proxy. If you're doing SSL inspection on premises, we're going to be able to replace that too. But then we've expanded beyond that, right? We're going to be an entire security stack. So whether that's looking for ransomware or looking for phishing links, we can protect that. That's also going to include an entire next generation firewall in the cloud. Going even beyond that, we've incorporated technologies that you probably can't get on premises. So we've got our cloud sandbox where we're going to be able to look for zero-day threats and execute that code and see if it's doing anything malicious and protect your users from that. We've also got our inline data loss prevention. So checking to see if your users are putting your sensitive data somewhere out on the web and controlling it that way. We do also have our browser isolation. We can send users to a completely separate isolated browser in our cloud so that we can protect their traffic there. Onto the private access side of things, this is going to be our VPN alternative. So it makes sense that we're going to be able to replace whatever is running your VPN today. So whether that's a firewall or maybe you've got a VPN concentrator, those can be replaced with Zscaler private access. And then a lot of the systems that go along with supporting a VPN like that. So you probably have some load balancers sending people to different gateways. So we're going to be able to get rid of that. And if you've got DDoS protection on that, which we're going to go into a little bit about why that's bad, we can get rid of that DDoS protection as well. It's just not needed in the type of architecture that Zscaler private access has. So as we dig a little bit deeper, we're going to go into that first use case. So how does Zscaler actually help to replace your VPN? So when we started building out Zscaler private access, we kind of took a look at how current VPNs are set up, and we wanted to fix the problems that came along with those VPNs. So one of the first things was identifying what those problems are. And the first one, and maybe the biggest one, is that you have private infrastructure that is exposed to the public internet. When I was working at major banks, right, the two places that were getting DDoS attacked were either the public website or the VPN, right? Because it has a public IP address, it has a host name that people connect to. So that gives you an attack surface for people to scan your network. It also gives them an attack surface to look for vulnerabilities. All the major VPN providers in the past 2 years have had vulnerabilities found in their VPNs, and that leaves you open to those attacks. And it makes it that you have to patch this equipment and keep up to date with it. And essentially that's more overhead and more time that your engineers have to spend supporting this equipment. Some other things to go along with that. So from an end user perspective, I can guarantee almost no one from a user perspective says good things about their VPN. That's just sort of the nature of VPN. From an end user perspective, logging in every day, going through any multi-factor that they have to do. And if you've got multiple VPN gateways, that's even more complexity on top of that. And then from an administration point of view, usually when you log in, all you can see is whether somebody is on the VPN or off the VPN, and that's about it. No visibility into what they're going to or what they're doing when they're on that network. And then the third piece that I'm going to talk about in this next slide as well is that you have to go back to that castle and moat drawing that I showed that probably scared everybody in order to try to control what people are doing on your VPN, right? You have to rely on subnets or ACLs or firewalls to control, because that user actually has an IP address on your network. and meaning that you have to control them at a network layer. So I do like to bring that back sort of to a real life metaphor of what that's like. So let's imagine an office where you just have a reception desk and a user is coming in for a meeting. So that user is going to go ahead and check in at the reception desk. They're going to get a room badge. But in a traditional firewall VPN world, after they're past that VPN, they can go wherever. They can go to multiple different rooms. They don't even have to maybe go to the specific meeting room that they're trying to get to. So this is basically what happens in a VPN. Once they've bypassed that, sure, they can go to the application that they're meant to go to, but somebody else is trying to snoop around your network could go to other servers that are on that same subnet, that same ACL, depending on what you've controlled. What we're going to do in a in a Zscaler private access world is essentially we're going to be an escort. So after the user has authenticated and everything, we're going to walk with them to that particular meeting room. If they try to go anywhere else, we're going to go ahead and block them, turn them around. And then when they're done, we're going to escort them right back out. That's more secure. We can do that micro segmentation so that users can only get to the specific application they're trying to get to. They can't go sideways or east to west in your network. And if they try to, they get blocked. So we're going to centralize all those rules in one place, and we're going to give you granular controls on that. So how we do it is pretty simple. And I'll go ahead and pop up a few of these pieces here. So let's take a look at the bottom first. So our users are connecting from all sorts of different places, and they're connecting over all sorts of different networks, whether it's fiber or broadband or mobile like 4G or 5G. How are we going to control that? We're going to install our Zscaler client connector agent on that machine. That's going to take care of forwarding all of their traffic to the closest Zscaler service edge to wherever they're at. The second piece is that we're going to connect into your identity store. We want to know who that user is so that we can build rules based on that user's group, department, and location. We're also going to be able to do things like device posturing. So maybe you want to allow corporate users connecting from corporate-owned devices, full access or more access into your data center. Then you do somebody who's connecting from their own personal device or a BYOD device or maybe a device that's sitting in like a hotel lobby. We're going to be able to do that with Zscaler Private Access and our Zscaler Client Connector. Up at the very top, you're going to see a little plug-looking icon. That's what we call our Zscaler App Connector. That's a lightweight Linux virtual machine we're going to put in your infrastructure on a network that can access all of your applications, whether they're sitting in an on-prem data center or whether you have applications living in AWS or Azure. This app connector is going to make an outbound connection to the Zscaler cloud, and it's through that outbound tunnel that we're going to establish micro tunnels back into your organization. That's how we get away with having no public IP address or inbound ports, getting rid of that surface area attack completely that your traditional VPN has, and also removing the need for DDoS protection. This is going to improve your user productivity because they're not constantly having to log into this VPN. It's going to give you greater control over what they're allowed to access, like we showed in that previous example. It's also going to increase your business agility. If you get a new data center or you start moving cloud applications to the cloud, you just put an app connector in that location and then you're done. Maybe you absorb another company, same thing. So Zscaler is going to give you that flexibility and that performance that your users are looking for in a VPN alternative. So the next piece is, how does Zscaler protect your users? And I believe we have a poll question for this one. So I'm going to let the Info Exchange group bring that up. So what is the percentage of internet traffic that is encrypted, SSL encrypted? Less than 15, between 25 and 50, between 80 and 90, and 100%. And I'll give everybody some time to answer that. Cool, I'm good to end the poll whenever you guys are. All right, less than 15% was the highest one, and between 80 and 90% got one vote. So whoever picked that one vote is correct. Just about 90% of the internet is SSL encrypted. So that's when you go to a website or a SaaS service like Google or Office 365, you can see the little lock in the upper left-hand corner of that URL. That means that traditionally, no one has been able to look inside that traffic. So inside that traffic could be malware. Last time that I took a look at the numbers, about 46% of malware was coming down inside SSL encrypted traffic. It's also going to mean that sensitive information could be leaking out of your organization in that encrypted traffic. So I think you see the need for the ability to take a look and open up that traffic and see what's going on inside of it. The problem is that traditional on-premises hardware can't do that at a rate that your users are expecting for performance. That's because it requires CPU and memory utilization to be able to do that. What's going to happen is that with Zscaler's cloud, because of our architecture and our patents in this space, we're going to be able to SSL inspect that traffic at a scale that nobody else can. What this is going to allow you to do is have inline analysis of all that unknown content, and it's going to follow the user wherever they go. So like I said before, if they're connecting from their home network, we're still going to be able to do that SSL inspection. We're still going to be able to look inside that traffic for malware and secure it. So again, let's take a look at a real world example of what might be going on inside some of your encrypted traffic. One of the big ones is going to be ransomware, right? It's on everybody's mind. Everybody's been hearing about it in the news constantly. You know, ransomware is a big thing and it's a big business, right? So protecting your users from ransomware is important. Ransomware generally has about 3 big stages that it tries to go through. The first is that it's going to attempt to install itself on one of your end user machines in some form or another, whether it's a phishing email or they're clicking on a link to install an executable that they're not aware about. And Zscaler Internet Access is going to be able to protect your users there. So we're going to block phishing attempts. We're going to block malware installs. We're going to block ransomware from your users clicking on it, from them being able to download it. If there is a 0-day threat or a completely unknown piece of malware that's coming through, we're going to be able to run that through our sandbox and actually determine in real time if it's malicious or not and block it for your users. If your users happen to get infected some other way, maybe they found a flash drive in the parking lot and they plugged it into their machine and got ransomware on it that way. The second piece is that ransomware wants to move laterally within your organization to try to elevate its privileges and infect more machines. This is where Zscaler Private Access is going to come in. Because we've done that micro segmentation, they're not going to be able to get to things like the domain controller or other things they're not allowed access to. And along with some of our integrations with endpoint protection, we're going to be able to dynamically restrict access if a user's machine is compromised. So that's how we stop the spread of that infection in east to west traffic. And then the third component is if they've made it this far and they've infected some of your machines, now they're going to attempt to steal some of your data and then demand a ransom. That means they're going to try to extract that sensitive information out of your organization and hold it against you. That's also going to be protected with Zscaler Internet Access because we're going to be able to scan that traffic, that SSL encrypted traffic, and look for that sensitive information as it's leaking out of your organization and block it. It makes their demands way less important if they don't have as much of your sensitive information to ransom against you. So this screen is going to look very familiar because we use basically the exact same setup for Zscaler Internet Access as we do with Zscaler Private Access. It's the same agent on the machine, so there's nothing new to install for your end users. Everything is going to be exactly the same. The only difference here is I've added the upper left-hand corner of this, right? So rather than brokering your connection to those internal applications, we're going to broker it to those external applications, things like Office 365, Salesforce, G Suite, or just any website that's out there. We're still going to be able to build rules based on users, groups, and departments. We're still going to be able to decide if somebody should be going to a sanctioned or an unsanctioned application. And at the same time, because of our scale, we're going to be able to do that SSL inspection in a performance level that your users expect so that they can do things like stream 4K video, watch Netflix, whatever they have to for work, and they're not going to notice that SSL inspection, but they're still going to be secure and protected from that ransomware. So again, improve your end user experience. We're going to give you protection for those users, whether they're on-site or off-site. And we're going to increase your business agility, right? Just being able to install that agent on your users' machines and then say, hey, you can work from anywhere. We're going to be able to broker that access successfully is super important in being able to grow your business, make it secure, and reduce complexity. And so that is the end of what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully that gave you a little bit better or more grounded understanding of what is actually inside the Zscaler Internet Exchange. And then I believe that we have a question and answer section. So I'll go ahead and turn this back over to the Info Exchange group.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Michael. Ondel, let's see. I saw one question.
Yes, I saw one question, but
So
let me just ask a few questions.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
First, when it comes to Michael, when it comes to the VPN, what exactly are some of the issues that we have found with VPNs over the last 2 years in terms of, security risks? What are some of the things that we can highlight to let our attendees understand the risk associated with VPN?
Yeah, I mean, so all of those major providers, if you're thinking, Pulse Secure, AnyConnect, the Fortinet VPN client, they've all had very public vulnerabilities against them. So that meaning that people can scan your firewall, your VPN to see if you have a lower patch version, something that hasn't fixed that vulnerability. So that means that your organization is constantly having to respond to these by putting in work hours to it, right? You're having to get your engineers up, probably do these changes in the middle of the night, because that's always when I had to do these changes, right? And patch these vulnerabilities, or you're going to be open to attack. So that's part of it. The second is that just by the very nature of it, you're open to DDoS attacks. And as botnets and everything on the dark web become cheaper, that people can just buy these attacks and launch them against anybody that they don't like. If you happen to have somebody that has a grudge against you or is attempting to hold you ransom for things, they can just DDoS your VPN concentrator, and then your users can't work for that day, which happened multiple times at the major US bank that I worked at.
Right. And I think if we may add, a VPN actually extends your network out to the user. So therefore, your user is now part of your network. So if you have 100 users working from home or working from anywhere, then you have extended your internal network to 100 different locations. And those locations may be not as secure as your office. And hence, whatever is happening in that environment will get to creep into your environment as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that goes to the ransomware protection and also that scary slide I showed at the beginning, trying in the castle and moat, right? So if somebody gets infected with ransomware with a VPN, they're on your network, meaning that if you haven't segmented or have a bunch of internal firewalls or something looking for that, that ransomware is going to be able to spread to your AD server or your MDM solution, like in the Kaseya attack, and then it's going to get pushed out to all of your users, right? So now suddenly you've gone from one person infected to everybody's infected because they were all on your network at the time. Which actually had a friend who was protected from that because he was on vacation. His computer was disconnected from the VPN when his company got hit. And so his didn't get ransomware on it. And they were telling people, please do not connect to the VPN. We haven't fixed this yet. So it happens every day.
Right. And Zscaler does it different, meaning that you're not on a network. So if you can just go through that a little bit in terms of how come you're still able to access your internal applications, but Zscaler does not actually let you on the network. They just connects you to the application.
Yeah, right. And so in that diagram, right, we're connecting that user through that app connector, that Linux machine that's sitting in your environment. And we're not actually giving your user an IP address on your network. We're going to give them a synthetic IP address that they talk to, but it's really just something that sends their traffic to Zscaler. And that's just like the escort example, right? We're going to walk that user to the application that they're supposed to be accessing and walk them right back out. So if they're trying to do things like scanning your network, looking for your IP address scheme, looking to see which servers have ports and protocols open, that escort is going to say no and say, you're not allowed to connect to that and block that access. So that reduces the reconnaissance part of the ransomware attack as well, so that users can't see that.
Right. And I guess the other part of it is that the threat actors that are on the internet, can they actually see your applications?
They cannot, right? Yeah, we've completely taken that off of the internet, right? So because we've put that app connector behind your firewall, doesn't have a public IP address or an inbound port open for it. So people can't attack what they can't see, right? So there's nothing to launch attacks against. There's no IP address, there's no host name. That's why you don't need DDoS protection.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So someone has asked this question. Is Zscaler also replacing my firewall?
Yeah, that's a very great question. So we can definitely reduce the need for your firewall because we've taken away a lot of the major components of it, right? We've taken away the VPN part of it. And with Zscaler Internet Access, we're going to be an entire outbound firewall stack. So we can control whether people can SSH or RDP on certain ports. We can also look for intrusion prevention on that. So if you're hosting something like a public website or something, you'll still need something like a WAF that does inbound protection for that. But for your corporate users, it really means that you don't need a firewall anymore, a traditional firewall.
Right. And I mean, as we move to where your applications are within premise and in the cloud, then using something like SD-WAN, software defined wide area network software appliances and hardware appliances would be a better fit than a firewall in terms of for security. And that can also be security chained to Zscaler to provide that ultimate security net.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, Zscaler and SD-WAN go hand in hand. We've got a lot of API connections into SD-WAN providers, so you can build tunnels to Zscaler super easy. But yeah, right, the whole name of the game is reducing complexity and making your organization be able to respond to changes quickly and seamlessly. So deploying SD-WAN is super easy. You know, it can automatically build tunnels to everything, and you can offload all of the heavy lifting for your security to Zscaler, right? All you got to do is get your traffic to us, and SD-WAN is great for that.
Okay, and I think it's good to note that all the major companies that got hacked had a firewall, so it doesn't make you more secure. It's trying to keep out that which is not, that is already in your environment or has actually come into your environment because your user clicked on a phishing email or they actually accessed a website that was compromised. So they're no longer, the threat actors are no longer trying to bore in. They're actually using much easier means to get at your users and to get at your crown jewels.
Right.
Yeah, I would say almost 100% of organizations that have been breached all had firewalls. So yeah.
And Ondel and Mike, one of the things that certainly stood out to me is that the internet has gone dark. Everything is inside the SSL now, and there are many organizations that due to the size of their firewall, haven't turned on SSL inspection because there's a direct impact on the performance of their network experience. And that really was for me a big eye-opening revelation. If you want to expand a little on that.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look, generally you can go find online if your firewall has the ability to do SSL inspection. You can see that when you enable that feature, they'll tell you something like a 40% hit to bandwidth that can actually go through it.
Right.
Because it requires those resources to do that. So you're having to either buy a much larger firewall or you're having to just give your users a poor user experience because you can't send that amount of traffic through there. So it's important to be able to do SSL inspection. It's important to have that feature capability, but it's also important to do that in a way that doesn't impact your users' work, right? We want them to still be able to work and do the things that they need to do at a speed that they want.
And from a senior management perspective, that's a big blind spot in that you think that your protected, and you're fine. But in fact, there's this 90% of the traffic is dark and you're not looking in it.
Yep.
And that's where the bad guys are hiding their stuff. Yep.
Yeah, and most of the time it's a technical decision, right? Is that we don't have the capability or the resources on our firewall to inspect this traffic, so we're not going to have that feature turned on, or we're just going to selectively turn it on for a few websites, right? And that's leaving a majority of the internet unprotected. You have no visibility into it.
Right. Okay. And I think we should get to some more of the questions. You want to get the next one?
This one is a bit for Yitzhak. What are some of the inherent costs of switching to zero trust? Where can a company expect to see immediate savings, if any? And would that cost savings include savings on infrastructure, consultants to monitor firewall, etc.? Yitzhak?
Yes, absolutely. I'm here. So the biggest benefit when we start talking about an alternative that's more safe and secure, the inherent cost savings comes from first that the intangible, right? The benefits that we were talking about, and the main one is to start adopting a zero trust network access. When we start talking about all these possible breaches and breaches that have occurred, I would actually pose a question: how much are you willing to compromise? What's the value of you being held hostage for 1 hour? How much does that cost to your company, right? So that will be one thing. The other thing is, when we're talking about hardware, there's always implications about people maintaining this hardware, companies paying for electricity, AC, and having to refresh these hardware appliances every 3 or 5 years because they're becoming end of life. There's no more support for it. What about if we tell you there's a better way where you don't have to worry about upgrading to the latest operating system because it's on beta version and maybe it's not even compatible with the hardware? What about if you can picture a world where you're using always the latest and greatest in cloud delivered security without exposing your network, that's logically bound to just user to application and nothing else, that's removing the attack surface, right? What's the value on that, right? So it just goes well beyond, what we see on a spreadsheet, which is hardware versus a cloud delivery solution, right? It just goes beyond that.
And I think, just the fact that I'm reducing the complexity of that stack of technologies that I need at the edge to something that's simple, that can, simple deployment, simple upgrade, simple management. That's, I think, how do you put value on that?
I mean, at David, we have seen, and Yitzhak, we have seen where, during 2020, you have, 300, 400 users working from out of the office. Something happens, a person, unfortunately, catches COVID-19. The entire office has to work now from anywhere, from home, from the coffee shop, and so forth. So therefore, that entire stack that you have spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars in, just became, a doorstop, because now your 400, 300, 400 users are now out on the internet, ready to be attacked. And what protection do they have? Most of the companies only send out their users with some antivirus on the endpoint. So therefore, what we are saying is security should follow the user. The traditional means and way that we used to do it in the past, in which we built a whole stack of security on premise because users, doing work meant coming to work and not actually, actually doing the activity. That is now past. I mean, I don't think we're going back there because, surveys have shown that users are actually going to be, in office and outside of office. So with that scenario, you want security to follow the user and you don't want your users to be on the network, especially when they're in an unsafe location.
Right. The bad guys have taken notice that many IT departments have been pressured to accommodate work from home.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this for years, but thanks to the pandemic, there was a rush, and there are lots of gaps, and the bad guys have certainly taken notice. There was another question here from Colin on microsegmentation.
Yes, you're asking, please explain what is microsegmentation and how does it work with Zscaler? Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine I want to allow myself, Michael Rockey, to SSH to a particular server. Let's say my home, file or my home Linux server. So I could build a rule that says Michael Rockey is only allowed to SSH to this particular server. So that means if I tried to access it on a web port or 443 or RDP, I would get blocked. All I have access is to that particular server on that particular port. And some cool things that you can do is that, let's take the AD server, for example, or whatever your identity store is. Maybe you allow your users to access the AD server on only the ports that are required for the user experience part of it, and you leave the administration ports to only be accessed by your IT department. So SSHing, getting into the web ports or RDP ports of your AD server is just for your IT group. Everybody else can still access the server, but we've made it more granular. We've micro-segmented just even that particular server. So there's a lot of different ways you can break up your network, but being more granular, more specific is what Zscaler Private Access wants to help you do.
Okay. So what we have done is to say you're no longer on the network. So therefore that app controller that we install within your network actually connects from within your network outwards. So therefore the users don't actually get onto the network, and it controls what you have access to. And you can actually say you only have access to this server on this port. So therefore, if there's a malactor on the machine that is trying to probe other entities or even that specific server, they really can't get to anything else because it's not allowed. So that is microsegmentation without doing network segmentation.
Right.
Just as simple as that, defining a rule.
Yeah. Right. Centralizing everything into one location so that you don't have to do it with old network methods in your data center, so that you don't have to try to segment people with ACLs or internal firewalls or VLANs. You can have a much flatter network internal in your private infrastructure with Zscaler Private Access, because all of your access is going to be run with the Zscaler Private Access rules.
Okay. Great. And this does not take long to do, meaning how long does it take to implement Zscaler?
No, so the fastest that I've had somebody set up a basic deployment of Zscaler Private Access is 45 minutes. So it goes very quickly. And what happens is we deploy in a very broad way so that your users have very broad access. And then we give you what we call our application discovery, which gives you the ability to see what your users are connecting to, and then very easily with just a few clicks restrict that access. Because we don't want to show up day one blocking a bunch of people from getting to stuff. We want to give you the tools to quickly deploy Zscaler Private Access and then build those rules over time. So generally we see people deploy very quickly and then build rules over the next month or two.
Great. All right, another question here. Can we get a little bit more details on how exactly Zscaler authenticates users to my network?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways that we can authenticate, but generally the easiest way is by connecting into your single sign-on provider. So if you're using something like an Azure AD or an Okta, Google's identity store, one login, ping login, there's a bunch of them. Basically anybody that's SAML 2.0 compliant, we're going to be able to authenticate your users with that. We're also going to be able to sync any groups or departments that they belong to in that identity store over into Zscaler. And we're going to be able to use those same groups and departments in policy creation. So we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. You're not going to have to redefine groups and stuff. We're just going to take what you already have, bring it over into Zscaler, so it makes sense for your organization.
I know for Info Exchange, I mean, within an hour or two, we are connecting to your internal AD, or we are connecting to Azure AD. So it's really easy to connect and authenticate your users. And the good thing about Azure AD is that you can then turn on multi-factor authentication, conditional access. So all the different things that you need to authenticate the user, we know how to do it, and you can enable it.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly.
Another question. Where does AWS native Zero Trust appliances fall short compared to Zscaler?
Yeah, so I mean, the immediate downside of any one particular cloud services platform is that if you want to leverage multiple clouds, if you have applications that live in an on-prem data center at your headquarters, right? AWS isn't going to be able to support or help you with that. They're going to be strictly AWS stuff. So Zscaler Private Access can broker your connections to all those different places. And from an end user perspective, they're not having to connect to multiple VPNs or gateways or anything. They just type in the host name or the IP address and we're connected to it wherever that application is. And then at the same time, generally increased capabilities like device posture checking, more granular micro-segmentation that we just talked about, and connecting into your identity stores for multi-factor are all features that would be hard to find in AWS's solution, native solution.
Right. And I think it is really important to point out that using a solution from AWS is no different from using VPN, meaning the user then has to say, okay, where's my application? Is it in AWS? Is it in Azure? Is it in on-prem and whatever it is?
Right.
You need a solution where the user does not have to think about where my
Doesn't
application
matter.
is.
Right. Right.
And that has been one of the most frustrating experiences around the VPN. Besides it being the most attacked network element in the network over 2020, the user experience actually is not that great.
Yep. And from a business perspective, you want to know that your remote workforce are as effective and as productive as they were if they were in office. And if things are frustrating, that is the time when they start to bypass and open up to security risks. So yeah. Thank you for that.
All right, here's another question.
Wow, coming hot and hard.
Why does Zscaler frequently change the public IP address of the connected user? You can answer that, Michael, if that is true or false. And then in the event of a breach, can we track the actual user IP address from the source?
Yeah, so the second part of the question, yes, the Zscaler logs are always going to show the actual IP address of the user, but both their internal IP address and their real public IP address. And then from the perspective of, let's just say Google servers, right? When you're connecting through Zscaler to Google servers, Google is going to see you coming from a Zscaler IP address range that is part of securing your attack surface area. That is part of because we're built on a multi-tenant architecture. So when you're sending your traffic through Zscaler, you're sending it through the exact same systems our largest companies are sending it through. All the ones that I think Yitzhak had on our slide, or Jay had in the video at the beginning, right? GE, Siemens, we're multi-tenant, just like every other SaaS service out there, like Netflix, Salesforce, Office 365, right? That's the only way you can actually scale all of this traffic. And by doing so, your user's IP address is going to come from a Zscaler IP address range, at least from the perspective of the website.
Right.
But in the logs, you'll be able to see everything.
The log shows everything. And the logs are real time, meaning that as something happens, you can actually check the logs. Unlike most equipment that it takes a delay to actually assimilate the logs. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So that answers that question. Say, explain how Zscaler and SSL inspection actually works.
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially all that needs to be done to get SSL running is to deploy the Zscaler root certificate onto your end user machines. And that is automated through the deployment of the Zscaler agent. So when that user agent is on your user's machines, there's nothing else you need to do. How it's kind of working behind the scenes is just like any SSL inspection. So that traffic comes to the Zscaler cloud. We're actually going to make the connection for the user to the other side. So Zscaler is going to make a connection to Google, and then Zscaler is going to pass back that conversation to the end user, and we're going to be in the middle and be able to inspect that. And we do that by injecting our own certificates into that conversation.
Great. Now, I love this question. Where is Zscaler? Where does the usage data that we can monitor, where is it ultimately stored? So the first question, where is Zscaler?
Yeah, Zscaler's everywhere.
Yes.
Where isn't Zscaler? Yeah, so we had the page that showed all of our data centers. So we've got data centers across the globe, lots of them in the U.S. and in South America, in Europe, and into Asia. Where the data is stored, so we generally have 2 repositories. So your logs are actually stored encrypted at rest. If your company is based on this side of the world, they're stored in North America. If you have GDPR compliance or something, your logs can also be stored in Europe. But your user's traffic is going to go through the Zscaler service edge at one of those over 150 data centers across the world.
Okay. All right. And a question here about, with the implementation of Zscaler, does the management shift from external to internal? Most
Internal.
likely
Yeah, internal.
Does the management shift from external to internal?
So
I can
so
maybe
I
use
guess,
a little bit more clarification on that. Yeah.
to rephrase that question, then if when you implement Zscaler, where does the management lie? How is it managed in terms of setting policies and putting the rules in place?
Yeah, exactly. It's at a publicly available console. So you're just going to go to something like admin.zscaler.com. That you're going to be able to log in with an admin account, and then you're going to see all the management. So yeah, we're not deploying any piece of hardware or management console onto your infrastructure. It's all done in the cloud. You access it like you would any other cloud resource like Google, Office 365, Salesforce, same thing.
All right.
One second.
Question. Yes.
Sorry, 1 second. There was just to remind everybody, please use the Q&A to post your questions. Don't use the chat. Just use the Q&A, please. Sorry, Onel, go ahead.
Yes. Just a follow-up question. When it comes to storing data in the cloud, does Zscaler store my data? Meaning, I'm going to, my private applications, I'm going to internet, I'm going to my SaaS applications. Does Zscaler actually store my data?
Yeah, that's a good question that comes in 2 parts. Yeah, so the first part is Zscaler is never saving the actual contents of your packet. So we actually run that content through volatile memory, so things like RAM. So essentially, once that packet is run through our malware engine, for example, it's gone forever. No one can take a look at the log. No one can see the internal information. So the way that I like to describe it is that you can see that a user went to Facebook, but you can't see what they posted about their boss, right? You're going to be able to see a log about metadata about that conversation, that they went to Facebook, that they sent this much traffic through it. This is how long they were on the site, but the actual packet contents is not viewable to anybody. We don't save that. And the metadata that we do save, it is encrypted at rest in our cloud. No one else can view it. We can't view it. It's secure.
Okay.
And that is going to be part of all of our SOC and ISO compliances that are available on that compliance page. And you also saw the logos of it on Yitzhak's documentation. So we can prove that we protect this sensitive information as third parties have looked at it.
Right. I think, as you say, on the compliance page at zscaler.com, you can actually see all the different compliance from GDPR to the different security compliance. So Zscaler does not store your data in the cloud. It actually just secures it and provides the information around the metadata around it. All right.
Yep.
Now, here's another interesting question. Is there a Zscaler free trial?
Yeah. So if you start a conversation with Yitzhak and we talk about your use cases and everything, we can always do what we can to get you testing out the solution. Yeah, for sure.
All right. And can Zscaler be overloaded based on how many persons and organizations it manages on its network?
No. So that's part of the multi-tenancy, right? Is because, it's not dependent on just how many people are in your organization or anything. Everybody's running through the same equipment. We have a 5 nines of availability SLA that is financially backed, which is the highest in the space. We're redundant in all of our data centers. We're also, we have multiple data centers, so your users are always going to be able to go to one that is functioning if there's an issue or if we're doing maintenance. So yeah, we're not going to be overloaded. There was a third-party group that was attempting to test the bandwidth capabilities of the Zscaler platform. They were doing all the secure web gateway products, and we actually exceeded the capabilities of the tool. So they couldn't figure out how much bandwidth Zscaler Cloud is actually capable of because it was too high, higher than the tool could actually send.
And could you give us an idea of what's the largest size organizations that you're actually protecting today in terms of users?
That's a good question. GE and Siemens are definitely up there. Yitzhak, do you know any specific numbers on the total users?
Yeah, for General Electric, we're doing 400,000 users around the world.
Okay, yeah.
So if we can take care of organizations that have 400,000 users trust Zscaler, then I think we can too.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Zscaler is in the cloud. If I lose access to the management console, what do I do next?
Yeah, so your rules are still going to operate even if you don't have access to the management console, right? Your users are still going to be protected. They're still going to be running through the cloud. If there is some issue with our management console and it's down or not available, it's going to be temporary and it's going to be back up momentarily. I haven't seen any type of long-term disruption to the management console.
We have never seen any problem with that. And if you do lose your access, then of course you can call support and it can be reset.
Right.
Yep.
That's right.
All right. In an environment where BYOD is used, how do we give users their personal privacy, but keep them protected while accessing organizations' resources?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, it kind of comes down to the fact that if your user is going to be accessing stuff that's internal to your organization, they could be a threat vector, right? And so we do have capabilities where you can give people the option to turn off the service when they're not using it. You can also make it tamper resistant so they can't turn it off, totally dependent on what you want to do. But essentially, the Zscaler viewpoint is that you want to secure your users' traffic if they're going to be connecting to your network. And with that, they're just going to have to understand that metadata about what they're doing on the internet is going to be collected. We can definitely put an end user notification on the agent when they log into it so they can be aware of what's going on. But yeah, it's one of those things where that unless they have full security or anything, there is no such thing as a safe BYOD device, right? So you've just got to set that sort of corporate policy to understand what's going on.
So policies must be in place. And of course, you must be able to enforce those policies within Zscaler, and you can. All right.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, we're not going to keep the package contents of your users. So if they're really unhappy that you can see that they went to Facebook, that's just a conversation you'll have to have about the user. But like I said, you won't be able to see what they're doing on that site. Definitely.
So Gregory is asking, coming from a Fortinet setup using FortiClient VPN, does Zscaler assist with migration?
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a full deployment services team. So when you make the step to move forward with Zscaler, we're going to give you 3 months of a deployment engineer who's going to help walk you through deployment, start getting your users set up, help migrate any rules or anything that you might have in the Fortinet VPN and get you up and running. And another important piece of deployment services is that they're going to help you leverage all of the features and capabilities that you have in Zscaler, right? We don't want to get you just half deployed and then send you on your way, not utilizing all the features that you paid for. So that's what our deployment services is going to help you with.
Definitely. All right. Would we need a physical device on-premise for all designs? So do we need to implement Zscaler? Do we need a physical device on-premise?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, so to make connections out to everything, you need a physical device, but I don't have my home router in my office with me. But essentially, I would hold up my home router and say, this is all you need in terms of a physical device, right? You just need something that's going to connect you to your ISP or whatever fiber connection that you have coming in. It doesn't have to be a giant firewall. It doesn't have to be something that's super expensive, right? Because we're securing your users no matter where they're at. So the same type of network that they have at a coffee shop, at their house, you know, if they're just using like a wireless hotspot, that is more than enough in terms of physical equipment needed to make that connection to Zscaler.
And at the actual data center end, what do they need?
In the data center for Zscaler private access?
Yes.
Yeah, so we just need a way to virtualize our app connector. So whether it's a VMware machine or Hyper-V, we have images built out in AWS and Azure for that app connector. So just some way to deploy that Linux machine is all we need in your data center.
Yep.
Okay.
And we're talking about 4 vCPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, 50 to 60 gigs of storage. Very small, very lightweight.
Yep.
And if I may add, it is true that if it is true that we might need a router, and this is when we're talking about deployments where companies actually want to forward the traffic from a specific location back to our cloud. We've had cases where they don't even want that, right? They want just no hardware involved, and they actually decide for a full agent adoption. So in that case, they don't need any sort of tunnel created by a router or any other type of hardware, right? So it could be just 100% cloud. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, with Zscaler Internet Access, there's no other additional pieces of hardware other than just installing the agent on the machine. It's just where Zscaler Private Access comes in, where we need that app connector in your data center.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I have a question here. Let me see. I guess this one would be for the agent. So the user has logged into the agent, and I guess it says that you need to re-authenticate.
Yep.
How does that work? And are those policies that you can set to say, okay, users have to re-authenticate every 2 weeks, or is it that when you're accessing a particular application that is actually quite sensitive, you can ask users to re-authenticate? But does it expire, or is it that it is actually something that is set in policy?
Yeah, it's set in policy, right? So for Zscaler Private Access, you have the opportunity to set how often somebody has to re-authenticate. And like you said, it can be different per server. So maybe for accessing non-sensitive servers, the user only has to re-authenticate every 20 days or something like that. But for maybe accessing a sensitive server, they have to have re-authenticated in the past 24 hours. I've seen it's completely controllable by you. I've seen people do all sorts of things from every 8 hours to like every 365 days. And it's important to note that with Zscaler Internet Access, we only ask them to authenticate once. We never ask them to re-authenticate into that product. We just want to know who the user is and fingerprint the device. After that, because they're going out to public services like Google or Office 365, we're not going to ask them to re-authenticate.
Yeah. And I think it is important to note that, security must be enforced, but the user experience must be great. And I think with Zscaler, what we have seen with our deployment so far as Info Exchange is that the users really love it. Meaning you log onto your machine, you enter your credentials once, and just like Office 365, you enter it once, and every 20 or 30 days you re-authenticate. And what they find is that they no longer have to think about, where's my application? Where do I need to VPN into? They don't think about it. They just bring up their browser, they type in the URL, and they're accessing their internal application. And they open another browser window and they go www.google.com, and they're at Google. So at the same time that they're accessing their internal applications, they're accessing their internet applications. And the security is actually, within one single pane of glass. You no longer have to think about, is this internal, is this an external application? And the other thing about it is that from a security standpoint, the admins, the CISOs, the IT managers, the CIOs now know that I have complete visibility into that user's activity. I can actually control that user's activity to say, during work time, they only have access to these features on WhatsApp, but outside of work time, they have access to everything. So you can even have application control, URL filtering, bandwidth control. So you can say, my office is connected. Office 365 is more important as an important tool. make sure that enough bandwidth is available for Office 365 so that videos on Google and so forth don't interrupt. So there are so many different features and functionality in terms of security and the user experience that Zscaler provides.
That's zero trust, right? Connect users to applications no matter where the application is. Doesn't matter if it's private, public, whatever it is. Let's just focus on connecting the user to it. Let's not focus on what network it is.
Yes, and we didn't really get into the part about data loss prevention. We will actually get to that in another seminar where we'll talk about, you know, the Data Protection Act is coming. We know that. We spoke about it the last time in our data protection seminar. So Zscaler actually allows you to actually have full data loss prevention in terms of data loss prevention to the internet. So most of the time, the bad guys are actually looking to implement ransomware, encrypt your files, and at the same time, or before they encrypt your files, they actually exfiltrate your data out of your network, and therefore you hear of this whole concept of double extortion, in which they're saying, well, if you don't pay me, I'm going to release your data to the world. So Zscaler actually has comprehensive protections against that, and we will talk about that in a future seminar.
And if I may add, I actually have a poll question that I would love to post. Hopefully we can do this in 30 seconds, and I'll briefly touch on this in the next 15 seconds. Can the Info Exchange pull up the next poll question here? Hopefully everyone's paying attention. And the question reads, what is the #1 challenge to overcome to ensure data protection? And we have poor user experience, encrypted traffic, high data loss, gaps between data protection services, limited context with controlling data usage, or compliance violations across cloud. What is the #1 challenge? We'll give it a few more seconds. And I think we're ready to see the answer. Poor user experience came in at 42%. Encrypted traffic, high data loss, 8%. And we can see the rest. Okay, so the #1 challenge is the second one, encrypted traffic, high data loss. And my point to this particular poll question is to tie it back to something we've been continuing to say across this whole webinar. It all starts with great SSL inspection. That's how you provide inline real-time security for data protection. And this is something Michael mentioned. Remember that poll question that we had before. How much of today's internet is encrypted? Between 80 to 90%. And by the way, the source for this metric is transparencyreport.google.com. 97% of the top 100 sites, yes, between 80 and 90% of the worldwide traffic is encrypted, but 97% of the top 100 sites are encrypted. That counts for 25% of worldwide traffic. So if that's the #1 challenge, it all starts with doing great SSL inspection. And that's the biggest differentiator, I would say, me working at this company is. And that is the reason why it should be important for companies to take a look at doing SSL inspection, because otherwise you're only providing security for 10% of your traffic. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Right. Thank you, Yitzhak. Indeed. All right. So on that we have, well, two, I guess, related questions left.
Okay. Michael, could you just quickly describe how does Zscaler actually record sessions and actually what types of reports can be extracted?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of reports. So things like shadow IT reports are super popular. So, you know, what your users have been going to and whether that website is risky or not. We have reports for like your end users' browsing history, whether there's particular users that are clicking on more phishing attempts than others. We can give you an entire report for like your company's security posture, right? Maybe see like a trend, you know, no one was clicking on phishing links up until a month ago, and now people are clicking on like 20 a day. You know, what's going on with that? So because we're taking a look at all that internet traffic, there's a lot of different reports in there, including business reports, quarterly business reports, executive reports that show you what you and Zscaler are doing together with your organization. I'm thinking that the question about recording screens comes down to actually being able to see a video of the user's recorded screen. Does that seem like what that question is?
Well, in terms of recording a session, not sure if it went down to that, but Colin says yes.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we can't record the actual end user's screen, you know, what they're clicking on and what they're going to do because of where we're placed, right, in the internet, right? All of their internet traffic is coming to us. So we're just seeing that exchange of information. So we can't see the end user's screen. But essentially, we're protecting that traffic whether it's when it's coming from some location. So you know, your user's traffic is going to be secure. And that's why a lot of our reporting is built on taking a look at what your users have clicked on, taking a look at what type of malware has attempted to come to your organization, because we're going to block it by default. You know, your users aren't going to have any insecure stuff on their machine. Our advanced cloud sandbox, a really cool feature of it is when that sandbox actually executes that code, maybe it's a malicious executable, you'll actually get screenshots in the report of, you know, the desktop and what it looked like and what that program was actually doing. But yeah, in terms of actually recording the end user screen, we can't do that.
Yeah, we have other security solutions for session recording, which is under privileged access management, where, you know, if you're accessing your users, your admin are accessing, you know, a private app like AD, Active Directory, or they're you know, accessing their payroll app, you can actually record the sessions, but that is different from Zscaler.
Right. Okay. All right. Wow. I think due to time, you know, this has been a great question and answer session, Lundell. A really awesome question and answers. And we'd like to continue the engagement if people have more questions to ask. But I think unless there's any more burning questions, I think we'd like to start.
Yeah, the last question, I mean, in terms of file types, we can block, you know, name the file type, Zscaler can block it. So therefore, you know, if you say that, you know, zip files, you know, whatever types of different files you don't want your users to download, because EXEs, if you feel that those are sensitive, you can actually set policies to block those. And, you know, being able to record contractor sessions, Zscaler, when your contractors, if you set up your contractors to access your private applications, everything that they do in terms of accessing those private applications, it is actually recorded in the logs for private access, meaning when they are securely, when you set them up to securely access your private applications, everything that they do is actually in the logs. And remember, it's not like a VPN. A VPN allows your contractors to be on the network.
On the network, right?
Zscaler private access, your contractors will not be on the network, and hence, even if they are compromised, they are not able to get to your other assets, only the assets that you allow them to get to, and only on the port that you allow. So therefore, if they only need to get to it on port 80, you say in the policy, contractor 1 is only able to get to application 1 on port 80. That's it. They can't get to port 443, they can't get to port 90, 100, whatever, or application 2 and 3. So, and we record everything that they do and where they're coming from. And you will know which contractor it is because they have to authenticate. So you can't want it better than that.
Yeah, indeed.
All right.
Okay. Is there anything further on that? Any other ones? No. Okay. That's.
One is asking about CP hours, but not for this webinar.
All right, another
Not for
time.
this one. Not for this one. But David, we can close out.
Yeah.
You know, definitely thanks to Michael and Yitzhak for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you.
thanks for hosting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
So, you know, again, thanks to the panelists on the Yitzhak, Michael. Thank you so much, guys. And you know, as a promise to everyone, this was you know, one of the best couple of hours you could spend on a Wednesday. But if you want some more information, you know, on Zscaler, you know, and how it can painlessly reduce that complexity and improve your security, just give us a call, 876-931-9552, or email us info@infoexchangeja.com, or just fill out that survey that you'll see at the end of this session. And you know, we'll really be happy to spend a little time with you, no strings attached. Stay safe and have a good rest of your day. Blessings to all.